voices in the vents. Maple Street had always been the kind of place where people talked in whispers when they walked past the old house at the end. The Anderson family, the original owners from the late 1800s, had built it for reasons unknown. There were stories that the Andersons were strange folk, obsessed with local folklore and arcane practices, known for hosting gatherings that people described as both church services and ceremonies in the dead of night. Some said they had tried to summon spirits from another realm. Others said they were only practicing superstitions to ward off something that lived below. Whatever it was rumored they built the house directly over a tunnel system that predated the town, and there had been no family in town brave enough to live there since they disappeared. The Steeles, Tom, Linda, and their teenage son Sam were new to the area. City folks, they dismissed the warnings and superstition, chalking it all up to small-town ghost stories. The house was a bargain, and Tom, who loved history, found its antique charm irresistible. Sam, however, had a bad feeling from the moment he saw the house. He felt the weight of 100 unseen eyes on him the second he crossed the threshold, though he brushed it off, trying not to let his parents see how spooked he felt. The first night, Sam noticed the vent in his room was cold, colder than the rest of the house, with an odd, earthy scent that made his stomach churn. He tried to ignore it, but a faint, scratching sound kept him awake. He dismissed it as an old house settling, but deep down, he felt something was wrong. Days turned into weeks, and strange things began to happen. Sam would wake up to find his belongings moved, his closet door open when he knew he'd closed it. One morning, he found small handprints smeared on the inside of his bedroom window, though his parents insisted it must have been from the previous owner's children. Then the whispers started. At first, they were so faint he could barely hear them, just soft murmurings that could have been the wind. But over time, the voices became clearer, louder. They would come from the vent at night, always just after midnight, a soft, persistent whisper that seemed to know his name. Sam, come closer. It was subtle at first. He thought he was imagining things, or maybe even dreaming. But night after night, the voices grew louder and more insistent. Soon, he could make out full sentences, chilling phrases like, "He's almost ready," and "Come join us below." One night, Sam heard his mother's voice coming from the vent. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, thinking she was calling him from downstairs. But when he went to check, he found his parents fast asleep. When he returned to his room, he found the vent cover had somehow come loose, lying on the floor. A draft of cold, wet air seeped out, filling his room with that sickly, earthy smell. As Sam crept back toward the vent, he could hear faint sobbing echoing from the darkness below. The next day, he finally confided in his parents, who listened with expressions of worry. Tom was skeptical but agreed to check the vent. He shined a flashlight down, seeing nothing unusual. Linda, however, looked pale. She didn't say anything, but that night, she woke to strange dreams. She saw Sam wandering through dark, twisted tunnels, his face blank and eyes wide, his mouth open in a silent scream. When she woke, she was so rattled that she agreed to let Tom call in a repairman to check the basement. When the contractor arrived, he descended into the basement and emerged an hour later, visibly shaken. "There's something odd under this house," he muttered. "I found a hidden passage, narrow and winding, and it smells rotten." He refused to say more, packed up his tools, and left without collecting his pay. The Steeles tried to forget about it, but the voices only grew louder, no longer confined to Sam's room. Now they could be heard throughout the house, soft whispers drifting from the walls, the floors, the ceilings, as if the entire house were speaking to them. Objects began moving on their own, lights flickered at all hours, and shadows seemed to slither along the walls, following the family as they moved from room to room. One night, Linda discovered a small, hand-carved doll in the basement, a doll that looked uncannily like Sam. The doll had an old, worn look to it, with faded blue paint for eyes and a threadbare grin. Linda felt a chill run down her spine as she stared at it. When she showed it to Sam, his face turned white. That, that looks just like me, he whispered, backing away. Despite their growing fear, the family stayed, hoping the disturbances would eventually stop. But things only got worse. Tom found more of those strange markings scratched into the basement walls, symbols that looked ancient, like they had been carved by hands that weren't human. He tried to look up the symbols but found nothing that matched, only old tales of the Anderson family's rituals. Sam's behavior began to change. He grew pale and quiet, often staring off into space with a blank look in his eyes. One evening, he whispered to his mother, "They're waiting for me. They said it won't hurt." Terrified, Linda insisted they leave the house immediately, but Tom wanted answers. He refused to let fear chase them out of their new home. One night, Sam vanished from his bed. His parents searched the house, calling his name, but there was no response. They found the basement door open, a trail of dirt leading down the stairs. As they descended, they found Sam standing in the hidden passage, staring at the wall, his hand outstretched as if reaching for something they couldn't see. Linda rushed forward, shaking him. But his skin was ice cold, his eyes glassy. He stared at her without recognition, then turned back to the wall, where he began scratching at the dirt, his fingernails clawing at something buried deep below. Tom grabbed him, pulling him away, and they raced back upstairs. That night, they locked the basement door, but the voices didn't stop. Now, they could hear them in every room, chanting softly, calling Sam's name. "Come below. We're waiting for you, Sam." The family tried to flee the next morning, but the house wouldn't let them. Every door they tried was locked, every window sealed shut. The air grew thick and stifling, pressing in on them, making it impossible to breathe. Shadows closed in from every corner, whispering, laughing, taunting. Finally, in a last desperate attempt, Tom broke down the front door, and they fled into the night. When they looked back, they saw shadows moving behind the windows, like figures waving goodbye. But Sam wasn't the same. He became withdrawn, his face pale and gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. He spoke in low murmurs, whispering to things only he could see. And at night, he would sit by the window, staring at the house on Maple Street with a look of longing. Within months, the Steeles moved far away, abandoning everything they owned. But the house didn't stay empty for long. Soon, a new family moved in, a couple with a young daughter who loved to play by the vents. On their first night, as they tucked her into bed, she whispered to her mother, "The boy in the vent says his name is Sam. He wants me to come play." And from the depths of the house on Maple Street, the whispering began once again.